Hi, everybody, and welcome to another segment of AstrologyAnswers.com's weekly forecast. My name is Terence. The week begins on Monday, July the 10th. Now, next week, on Monday the 17th, will be a new moon. We have a new moon every 4 weeks. A new moon puts a spotlight on where our attentions and our priorities are more drawn to. But the rule of thumb is, which I mention about once a month, is the last week or the last quarter moon phase is about winding down, wrapping up the lessons of the last new moon, which was about June the 17th. So the overall advice is the last week of the new moon cycle, which is this week. It's a time of winding down, and you wouldn't want to be launching any important new projects until next week when the energy is ramping up. Now, let's just start with Monday, July the 10th. Communication Mercury, conversational Mercury, will be in opposition or confrontation to manipulative, powerful Pluto. When Mercury is opposite Pluto, you might find yourself getting entangled in intense communication struggles. Now, you might be attracting somebody who is trying to convince you of their point of view and putting the pressure on strong, or vice versa. Maybe you're trying to convince somebody that you're right and they're wrong. Now, the moon on Monday, which sets the emotional public tone, is in fiery, dynamic, ambitious Aries. And that can trigger a lot of these arguments, this impatientness and irritability with that Mercury-Pluto. But the moon will leave fiery Aries and move into earthy, steady, grounding Taurus at 4:55 p.m. Pacific time. So where you might be getting caught up in these intense power struggles and it might be triggering a lot of anxiousness, when the moon goes into Taurus, you'll start to be calming down the energies. But I certainly wouldn't want to be negotiating any important agreements or contracts with that Mercury-Pluto until the moon goes into Taurus at 4:55 p.m. Pacific time. Now, on Tuesday, the moon is continuing in Taurus because the moon goes from sign to sign every 2.5 days. The steady, calming Taurus moon will be in harmony with expansive, traveling, optimistic Jupiter early afternoon, 12:02 p.m. Pacific time. That moon, that general feeling of the public with Jupiter, much more optimistic, more hopeful, maybe looking at more future plans could be education, which is Jupiter, traveling, which is the energies of Jupiter. On Wednesday, the moon in Taurus will cross over Uranus, a rebellious, unpredictable Uranus. Now, Uranus has been transiting through Taurus for a few years now, because Uranus has an 84-year cycle. And so once a month, the moon that sets that public tone will cross over or align with that unpredictable, rebellious Uranus. Now, that's the late morning Pacific time, and that can bring in unexpected surprises, unexpected upsets, But what it can be very useful is the moon can represent your habits, your emotional patterns. And when it crosses Uranus, it's more of an opportunity to break old patterns, shake things up, get out of a rut, getting out of an old stuck routine. Now, the moon on Thursday will enter into Gemini. Gemini is an air sign. Air needs a lot of freedom and space. Gemini is ruled by communication Mercury. When the moon is in Gemini once a month, there's much more restlessness, curiosity, conversations. That moon in Gemini will be in harmony with Mercury in the mid to late morning Pacific time. Mercury is the communication planet that rules the sign Gemini, the sign of information, communications. So this is very harmonious Thursday morning Pacific time for conversations, for writing, for speaking, for negotiations. Early afternoon, however, the moon will then be in a stressful angle to cautious, restricted Saturn. And so you might be brainstorming all these ideas, and you may be feeling very witty and playful in the first part of Thursday. But then the moon hits Saturn, and for some reason, you might be being really stuck, really worried. The thing is, this too shall pass. But the advice is early afternoon, 12 to 2 p.m. Pacific time, you wouldn't want to be interviewing for a job. You wouldn't want to be negotiating some kind of financial contract because you could be feeling really stuck and limited. But all that changes on Friday as the moon continues in witty, adaptable, flexible Gemini, but the sun transiting through the sign of Cancer will be in harmony with innovative, futuristic Uranus. That Sun Uranus will help you try all new things, reinvent yourself, be more open to technologies, to new ideas, original thinking. But you're going to be overall for the world is more open to the future and new ideas and progress. Gemini moon on Saturday will go void of course. 5:35 a.m. to 10:14 a.m. Pacific time, at which point the moon goes into Cancer. Now, when the moon's void of course, as I usually mention once a week, the moon is changing signs, but it's no longer aspecting any planets. So the energy is low, it's flat, it's unproductive. So the general rule of thumb here is when the moon is void of course, do not make any important decisions, don't launch any new projects. But the moon will then go into Cancer at 10:14 a.m. for the rest of the week. Cancer is more family-oriented, more nurturing, more emotional. When the moon's in Gemini, we're more in our heads. When the moon goes into Cancer, we're more emotional, more sensitive. Now, around 5-6 p.m. Pacific time, the moon in caring, nurturing Cancer will be in harmony with assertive Mars. That moon Mars going into a Saturday evening can really stir up a lot more passionate feelings, more activity. If you've been feeling bored and stuck by early evening Pacific time, that moon Mars will really stimulate some excitement to get out of the, some old boring stuck routine and have an exciting Saturday evening. On Sunday, the 16th, the moon continues in Cancer, but around 9 to 11 a.m. Pacific time, that emotional moon will be in harmony with optimistic, expansive Jupiter. Now, we had the moon favorable with Jupiter on Tuesday, the 11th, when the moon was in Taurus. Now, on Sunday, the 16th, the moon is in Cancer and is making another favorable transit to Jupiter, continuing in Taurus. Brings in a lot of optimistic feelings, a sense of generosity, wanting to expand. That could be expanding your knowledge through education, to traveling and expanding your world vision. So I want to thank you for watching. I hope you tune in next week with my next segment. Until then, be safe and well.